Jeff, thank you. This has honestly been a privilege, and we've had some great events. Back in June, we threw a diversity and inclusion event, brought over 175 people together, raised a crazy amount of money. We did a fitness class, raised a ton of money, brought people together, supporting the cause and the mission, and it's been all just an organic, wonderful situation to grow. So I want to just kind of set the ground rules with Denise Parker is going to be facilitating polling questions for the CPE credit. I want to just introduce Denise real quick and go through how that's going to go throughout this event. So Denise, take that away.
Yeah, thank you, John. Guys, this program has been approved for 1 CPE credit. In order to measure engagement, NASBA has us launch a series of polling questions throughout the presentation. So if you would like to get a CPE certificate, you need to answer 5 out of the 6 polling questions. I'll go ahead and pop the first one up right now. Give everybody about 20 seconds to answer. And it's not a test. It doesn't matter what your response is, just so you respond.
So periodically through that, we will be posting these questions. We're not going to stop the dialogue between Leah and Mike and I throughout this, but these polling questions will pop up sporadically throughout the event. I think that's it, Denise, right? Oh, she's on mute, but
if the pop-up doesn't go away, just click it close.
Absolutely. I just again, before we jump into the event, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. I would just prefer, we're going to run through some things with Leah first and then with Mike. I love hosting events where we can get a topic that honestly is relevant, sticky to the economy, sticky to business in Baltimore. These 2 topics are so crucial to people, estate planning and what Leah is doing with her new business, and then as well as with commercial real estate. These are 2 topics that I think are on the minds of everyone in the business community as well as just in life. And I really appreciate them taking the time, setting this up. The questions we'll go through Q&A at the end. If you do have a question, please note it in the chat as we go through, as I'd like to give Leah and Mike a sense of whether the questions you guys have, and then we can ping them back towards the end of the Q&A, as well as possibly afterwards, Leah or Mike could answer your questions separately through email. At the end of that, we will have networking if anyone would like to just hang out with me afterwards, if anyone wants to. But let's get the event going. Let's start talking about the 2 speakers. So first we have Leah Del Percio. Sorry, I'm nervous, I guess. But she is the president and CEO of Trustate, which, Leah, I want to talk about this because you recently launched this business. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing with Trustate.
Sure. So first off, thank you to you, John, for having me here today, and thank you to FEI and the Boys and Girls Club for inviting me to speak with everyone. I got involved with the Boys and Girls Club as their pro bono counsel while still in private practice at DLA Piper. I've always believed that providing youth with adequate resources and support in a safe environment so that they're better positioned to succeed is really the best way to improve society as a whole and the world we live in. And after getting to know the leadership there and hearing Jeff's vision for the future of the organization, I just knew I had to be a part of it and contributed in some way. And it's been really great to see it grow and move forward for the time that I've been involved. But what brings me here today is my expertise as a trusts, estates, and tax lawyer for individuals, families, and business. I started Trustate because I spent the majority of my career with estates of all sizes, but more recently with only the higher end of that spectrum. So mostly $50 million plus clients and estates. And during that time, I began to notice that these clients who could afford very expensive legal bills were more than happy to have law firms do all of the non-legal estate administration work for them when there was a death in their family. Everything from paying cable bills to closing out old bank accounts, consolidating assets, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very time-consuming process, and lawyers charge hourly for this type of work, and it's not, legal work necessarily. So I noticed that these clients really had the space that they needed to cope with their loss. And I thought about how, earlier in my career, I worked with, a different net worth set, and how all of that administrative and tedious work was a similar burden for those clients, not just the super wealthy. And it was in fact an even bigger headache for estates between around $500,000 of estate size, so total assets in the estate, to $8 million. This size estate usually has a lot of scattered assets and accounts that involve many administrative, tedious tasks, but those types of clients can't necessarily afford to have a lawyer do such time-intensive administrative work. Usually the lawyer in these situations gives the client a checklist of things to do and sends the client on their way for that work. The client generally has no idea how to effectively tackle this work and is grieving, so the process ends up being uniquely awful for them. So I knew there had to be a better way, and built out a tech-enabled service that lifts this burden off of people, where each client gets a designated estate concierge that does all these tasks for them, and where we have software on the back end that enables us to offer this high level of service at a price that's affordable for estates of all sizes, large and small. So, the reason why I literally went all in on my business during the pandemic was because, the business had what I consider the 4 key elements of creating something incredible and, changing the world, really. So, we solved first, problem solving. So we solved a really important problem that was affecting really everyone. B, there were no real answers and solutions out there that actually worked. I knew that businesses, the industry, and existing solutions were approaching this problem wrong, and were at best, not bringing a solution, but at worst actually making the problem worse. Ripeness would be the third one. I knew that the market was ready for a solution even before the coronavirus hit. And now that's only been amplified with, the additional deaths and harm that coronavirus has caused. And then, the secret sauce. I knew that, myself and my team were really the only people out there with the correct solution and that perfect mix of skills to bring something like this to market. So that's really why I formed my business, and did so in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, it's got to be, daunting during a pandemic to go through that. So much uncertainty. Is there, what do you think people should be thinking about during, this uncertain time? What's the priorities of people, and what should they be thinking about as far as estate planning?
Sure. So, I think given all of the noise that really surrounds everything we do these days, particularly in the news and related to the virus, my belief is, instead of focusing on all of these uncertainties which we're presented with, we should focus on what we can control and build simple strategies around that. And, the best place to, I think, apply that is with your estate planning. So, it's interesting because the simplicity part sometimes gets lost on the higher net worth clients that we have. With planning, the high net worth clients are surprisingly the ones that get the simple, easy things wrong the most. And, I really see this time as a time to go back to basics with clients and get their ducks in a row. And I think there's really 4 key things that everyone, whether it's you, your family, and your clients, should be doing. So, the first I'll talk about, which is, with will signing. So people, because people are thinking about their own mortality so much more than usual, will signings and estate plans are really on the up because of this. So if you didn't have a will or a trust or an estate plan beforehand, you probably have thought about it in the past few months. And if you do have one, you've likely read that will to see what it says and to see if it needs to be updated. And oftentimes that's led to quite a bit of business for estate lawyers. Interestingly, because it's more difficult to meet in person now, and particularly was earlier in the spring, the governors of many states, including Maryland, signed executive orders which allowed for, certain signings, notaries, as well as will signings to take place remotely. So they were made possible, which was a great solution for someone who, say, came down with the virus and needed a will really quickly. And, clearly an estate attorney isn't going to go in and witness, and bring witnesses with them to do a signing, and family members couldn't get there. So you could do this all, remotely, which was wonderful. The problem with that is it was done via executive order, great for a quick solution, but the legislature actually still needs to catch up. So those executive orders typically in most states are going to expire. And at that point, if the legislature does not catch up, they'll need to actually go and re-sign new documents when it expires. In most states, it likely will catch up, but it's something that should be on the forefront of your mind, or your mind for your clients, as time passes, if they've signed an estate plan or are planning to do so in the near future remotely. Oftentimes, the estate lawyer isn't going to actually proactively follow up with that client to say, hey, you need to come in and sign a new will because your one right now isn't valid anymore. So I think that's a really important, easy tip for us to tell our clients and colleagues and family members, to make sure that their will is still valid if it was signed during this time. I think more importantly, even in addition to that, is really what we can do with gifting right now. So starting a couple of years ago, and many of you may know this, and if you don't, you actually have an amount that you can give to family members, or anyone you please, free of estate tax and gift tax. So essentially you have this amount, and for a long time it was around $5 million, but adjusted for inflation, where you could make gifts to third parties, and not have to pay a tax on that gift. If you go over that exemption amount, it's a 40% tax. And this would be the same with your estate as well. You can leave money to the beneficiaries of your estate of up to that threshold, and anything over it, there's this 40% tax, which is a big hit for people to take. So, a few years ago, the government with the Trump administration increased those exemptions by doubling them. So right now, a single person who isn't married can leave $12 million, or nearly $12 million, to another person. And that exemption or that threshold will sunset back to $5 million in 2026. If there's a new administration, it's likely to go down even further. And for a married couple, they can leave $23 million in change right now, but again, that number is going to decrease significantly to at least half that, if not more, with a new administration coming in. So I see this as a really good time to actually, if you say you own a business and you don't have a lot of liquidity and you want to be able to, pay an estate tax bill when you and your spouse pass away, this is a good time to actually make a lifetime transfer of your assets, and you can do so, by using creative gifting techniques that are available to people. So there are some techniques available that allow you to retain an income stream or control over that gift to some extent when it's passing to certain people or in a certain vehicle, such as a certain type of trust. You can provide asset protection for future generations. You can incorporate your charitable giving and really just leverage that exemption with valuation discounts and take advantage of the low interest rate environment. So really, I see this as a time for really anyone with over $5 million in net worth to be talking to a lawyer about completed gift trusts, spousal lifetime access trusts, intrafamily loans and forgiveness. And anyone who is in a position where those are their clients should be recommending that that person seek legal counsel to take advantage of these exemptions before they ultimately go away. The third thing I think people should be focusing on is income tax strategies. So income taxes are likely to go up again, even before these exemptions go away or the increased exemptions go away. So clients should be using simple and easy income tax planning techniques. So, there's ways to, if you're intending to make charitable donations during your lifetime, you can minimize your income tax burden and maximize the tax benefits of those donations. So during lifetime, one really simple and easy strategy that many people overlook, but I happen to love, is donating appreciated stock. So if you have stock that, has a low basis where you're going to get hit with a big capital gains tax bill, if you're planning to make a cash gift to a nonprofit organization or what is best to do is to actually donate, a portion of that appreciated stock, and you can actually capture the full appreciation for income tax deduction purposes with really no downside. So that's an easy and simple strategy that anyone of any net worth, can use to help to, defray their income tax load. Within your estate plan, if you're planning on making a charitable gift, when you pass away, a lot of people will leave a specific amount in their will. I leave, $10,000 to the Boys and Girls Club. So what actually is a better technique for this is to leave it and reallocate it to a retirement account. So rather than leaving it as a cash bequest in your will, leave it as part of a designated beneficiary. I could designate either $10,000 out of my retirement account or another tax deferred account as the beneficiary of my retirement when I pass away, or a certain percentage. That way, you don't get hit with, your heirs don't get hit with the income tax load of inheriting a full retirement account, and you get some deductions for the estate. So, that's a really nice and, again, simple technique you can do without even updating your will to make charitable bequests to organizations that you like. Fourthly, I think this is probably most important, is that, as you're thinking about, your own mortality, and, it's an uncomfortable topic, and in such an uncertain time, you should really be, checking and updating what I like to call your holistic estate plan.
First off, I realize how little I know now, and I need to get my life in order. So that's one. But two, like when you say holistic, what do you mean exactly? What's the approach there?
Sure. So it's a term that I've coined that really extends far beyond, those estate planning documents that you get from a lawyer. It's much more than just your wills and your trusts. Too often, estate lawyers, and it's something that if you're an advisor to a client that has an estate lawyer, you should always be looking at for them and looking at their personal finances. But too often, estate lawyers, they create these wonderfully complex estate plans for their clients, but they overlook, assets that travel outside of that person's will or estate plan. So they'll overlook non-probate assets such as retirement accounts, which don't travel through your will and don't pass to beneficiaries under your will. They'll overlook what is/isn't jointly held. So, you may hold a joint account with your wife. I've too often seen an estate plan where, the person had this great tax plan in their will. All of their accounts had named beneficiaries on them and nothing passed through the will anyway. So it's important to really look at, everything going on in that client's life and really capture and know about all of their assets. Oftentimes people don't even know what they have. So, it's looking at the nature of the assets and the events that affect one's estate as well. And so they don't come back to bite clients and their family. I see this really as a two-pronged approach. So one being assets, really, as I mentioned, people often don't even know what they have. So it's really getting a better grasp on that for clients. And their estate planners don't always ask them about this. And then also people, we usually think of ourselves in just our estate plan in a vacuum, but usually you're a member of a family, you have beneficiaries, you have siblings, you have parents. And all of those people, it's going to affect their life if you were to pass away or if they were to pass away. So, I think I see the holistic estate plan really affecting family members as well. So for instance, if you have grandchildren and they've reached the age of 18, knowing that that person, especially in the age of COVID, needs to have a living will and a power of attorney, because you as their parent can't act for them, or as their grandparent, or whatever the case may be. Making sure that your aging parents have estate plans in place that make sense for you and don't leave you with a big bomb at the end that's going to take up all of your time and stress while you're grieving their loss. So, I see that really as being the quote unquote holistic estate plan. So, another example of this is when people, they have a pour over will into a revocable trust. An estate attorney will draft that for them, but the attorney doesn't actually, fund that trust. They end up playing hot potato with the person's advisor, and no one funds the trust. Everything passes through the will, and there was no point in doing that structure of an estate plan, because you're still going to probate court at the end of the day, which was the whole point of doing it, the way with a revocable living trust. So, it's involving account retitlings and really getting that whole picture for people.
Cool. Okay. So one thought, you started going into like the planning idea, like a little bit of the planning side.
Sure.
Your business, Trustate, is a settlement process. You guys do a big part of the settlement process. I imagine this is on the minds of a lot of people as COVID's affected everyone, the idea of getting in order. How has COVID kind of changed and, is allowing people to think about the way of settling?
Sure. So, one of the changes from me, starting my own company and moving out of private practice was, I'm no longer working on the planning side as closely and really handling just administration. So when someone passes away, really helping to fill that hole for people and make that process much smoother and easier, where they don't really have to do anything and they have the space they need to cope with their loss. So as I've been dealing with a lot more settlements, and there happens to be, a lot more death going on, sadly, what's happened with COVID has really been twofold. So you're seeing courts, like particularly the surrogates courts and the Register of Wills and the Orphans Court, closing, but at the same time you have increased. So those are the courts that deal with death. I should add that. But you're also seeing, the courts closing, but an increase of death. So when they reopen, there's often a line out the door, and it takes them months and months to actually catch up to process paperwork so that people can get appointed as personal representative if you're in Maryland, or executor, executrix if you're in other states. And I think that's important in that, what I've seen and ways we've been able to help clients is to just give them, a little bit of knowledge and guidance and help them through that process. So for instance, in New York, which, in certain areas was affected terribly by coronavirus, the courts, which are notoriously slow in New York City on a non-COVID day, were just practically going backwards with being able to process things. They were 4 or 5 months behind. And what we were able to do was just to give clients hints that, hey, you can actually e-file your estate, even if you're not using an attorney, online, and that gets you in queue so that you can get appointed quicker. So, we've really been able to provide tremendous value to people, not acting as their lawyer, but acting as their concierge and giving them just a little bit of guidance and advice on how to get things done in an effective way, so that they're, it's one less thing for them to be stressed about during this time.
Leah, I'll tell you what, the 2 polling questions, Denise, I don't know if the second polling question got through correctly, but I'm interested to see the results. The first polling question, whether or not anyone has an executor, it came back and it kind of surprised me, because I would have thought this audience might have had it set, but it looked like it was in the minority. But I don't know if the second polling question went through correctly, but we'll try to rerun that if we can. So no, let's see if that's right. Okay. We'll get through that. Leah, I appreciate your time. And honestly, I posted your website, and I hope that hope everyone checks it out and sees the streamlinedness of it and what is being effective based off of Trustate and what you guys do. I will also, when I can, put your business tagline. I know we'll be sending out information as well at the end. But thank you for going through this. And then the Q&A at the end, we'll maybe throw some other questions. If anyone has any thoughts, please throw them into the chat. We'll let Leah kind of review some questions and see which ones we can kind of highlight at the end.
Yeah, I'm happy to help too. I'll put my email address in the chat. If anyone, I know a lot of questions with what I deal with because it's very personal and private to people. I'm happy to answer, any questions and just be a resource for anyone offline for their friends and family and clients and themselves if they need it.
Yeah. And so, hang in there, Leah. We'll be right back to you. We're going to go to Mike Mendelsohn. Mike's been a friend of mine since sitting on the board for Boys and Girls Club of Metropolitan Baltimore. And I'm really excited for Mike just to share some of his thoughts and what he's seeing in the market. Mark is a VP over at Blackstone. Mike, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me, John?
Yes.
Great. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties on audio and video, but I think we're good for now. So thank you.
I'll tell you, I always like seeing your background too, because you got that nice sunroom. It's always nice to see Mike in the nice sunroom. But let's jump into it. Let's roll through this. I'll tell you, everyone's mind from a business standpoint, I think commercial real estate is one of those topics right now that everyone wants to kind of find out more about. I want you to kind of provide us with an overview of Blackstone, and then also I want you to tell us about why you became involved with the Boys and Girls Club as well.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you, John, for the earlier introduction, and obviously to everyone that has dialed in and joined us today and is spending a part of their Thursday evening with us. And of course, thanks to FEI for hosting the event. As John mentioned, I am a vice president of Blackstone. I have been with the firm for actually just shy of a decade at this point. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Blackstone, we are the largest alternative asset manager in the world. Today, we manage roughly $500 billion of capital on behalf of institutional investors, individual investors, across really all of the major areas of what I would define as alternative investments. So private equity, credit, hedge funds, and then of course what the main focus of today's discussion is on real estate. And so if I were to really just carve each one of those out, and make it a standalone business, each one of those respective businesses at Blackstone would be the largest in their respective industries. And so across our underlying portfolio companies, we own, call it 85 to 90 underlying companies. We do about $100 billion a year in annual revenue. We employ 750,000 people. In real estate specifically, we control over $450 billion of assets. And so we are the largest owners of real estate anywhere in the world. We are the largest buyers of real estate, sellers of real estate, largest financiers of real estate anywhere in the world. And back in 2011, I was really brought in as part of a small team that was really tasked with expanding Blackstone's reach into the individual investor channel. And that's a business which has grown from, call it 5 or 6 people, raising a couple of $100 million in a conference room in New York, to now a team of 150 professionals globally in what has become close to a $20 billion a year business for Blackstone. And as part of that build out, I moved down to Baltimore about 4.5 years ago to cover the Mid-Atlantic region for us. And so I've been living in the area for a number of years and really began what I would say getting more actively involved in the community and trying to understand the real challenges and opportunities, I should say, in Baltimore and how I could get involved in a meaningful way. And what I found in Baltimore was that there was an enormous effort and dedication, I guess, and a ton of people doing really, really great work in the nonprofit scene by a whole host of different groups. But what I noticed is a lot of those efforts were falling short, either because the groups were too small to really make a meaningful impact, or they were tied to a much larger organization that really handcuffed their ability to really focus on the specific needs of the community. And so I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Jeff Breslin, and his vision for the Boys and Girls Club was really inspiring to me personally. And what I found was that Boys and Girls Club was really unique in that they had the name recognition and, importantly, the backing of a massive national organization, but they also had complete autonomy to operate totally independently and with the specific needs of Baltimore in mind. And so after talking to Jeff about his vision, I walked away really a true believer in the Boys and Girls Club, and that it was not just another group trying to do good, but really was the only one in the region that had the infrastructure, had the flexibility, had the leadership to, in my opinion, really make a real meaningful, impactful, transformational change, not just for the kids that we serve, but for the city as a whole. And so I found it to be a real model that others could really follow. And so I'm incredibly proud to be part of the organization. John, I know you and I have spent a lot of time together in Boys and Girls Club, and would encourage anyone that's on this call that's interested in getting involved to to think about doing so.
Yeah, Mike's never afraid to ask, and honestly, you've done great work. And honestly, Blackstone's been one of the best additions to our board that I've seen in the past 5 years. So, bringing me to it's funny. Blackstone's such a major organization. I just want to kind of get your guys' philosophy during, where the world is in real estate. I want to just kind of get a general idea, of your guys' philosophy on real estate investing and where you guys, feel like you're going.
Yeah. So maybe I'll touch on sort of the investment philosophy and how we think about doing deals. So I highlighted, Blackstone's size earlier in my comments, and the purpose of that was not for bragging rights. In private market investing and really in specific in real estate, size is a huge competitive advantage because it gives you, I would say, first and foremost, access to information. And it also gives you secondarily the infrastructure that you need to really drive what I would call operational change and operational efficiencies through the businesses that you run and through the real estate that you own. And so at Blackstone, we really focus on what I would say two things. One, using the information that we are able to obtain from the underlying investments in real time to what I would say would be form opinions and identify trends in the market before they're happening. And that information really gives us an edge in understanding where to hunt. So it doesn't make us smarter than anyone else, but it certainly gives us more information on where to go and where to prosecute investment opportunities. Today, we own hundreds of millions of square feet of warehouse space, tens of thousands of apartment units, hundreds of hotels. In our lending arm, we lend to over 1,200 different businesses. And so every day we can look through into our portfolio in real time and see who's staying in our hotels, what currency are they using, what country are they coming from, what retailers are taking up more space in terms of warehouse space, who's contracting, what companies on the credit side are facing financial challenges. And so we can synthesize all of that information together and really identify these trends in real time. And so we layer on top of that really a data science team. So we get a lot of information internally, but also externally. We have a data science team that consists of now in excess of 30 professionals who look in real time at credit card sales, at rent rolls, at building permits. They scrape job postings to know at a micro level down to the specific building what space would make sense for large companies based on their hiring needs. And so, that information is really, really critical to us to understand, I would say, where the puck is going, but more importantly, to really avoid making mistakes. And so by way of example, we can underwrite an asset today at the asset level on a property based on 20,000 comps in the market, based on rent rolls, based on occupancy, based on demographics on the ground in 0.4 of a second. And so it's things like that that really have allowed us to, do things like, for example, accurately predict and know down to the actual plot where Amazon was going to move their HQ to in Virginia 6 months before they actually made that announcement. And so that's a huge, huge competitive advantage. And then the second component to that size, as I mentioned, is really the ability for us to leverage the scale to drive operational efficiencies through the businesses and the properties that we own. And so, a quick example of that would be doing things like group purchasing, lean, procurement, healthcare, negotiating with our vendors. And so, for example, collectively, Blackstone is the largest customer of FedEx in the world. We're actually larger than Amazon when you aggregate up everything that we ship, although that may have changed since COVID, but at least pre-pandemic, largest customer of FedEx in the world. And so it's not rocket science to know that if you're the biggest customer of FedEx in the world and you buy a business that yesterday was shipping at $10 a package, today they're shipping at $5 a package because you own them, that creates enormous value for the underlying businesses or the underlying real estate. And so what that really, allows us to do is focus on investing in real estate, where we can focus on growing net operating income and become really less reliant on multiple expansion. And so, I think that's really sort of how we would think about it from our investment philosophy.
Wow, that's interesting. That's crazy. That's crazy stuff, Mike. That's awesome. Honestly, I'm an example guy, right? So I always want to know the good and the bad. What do you see? The pandemic has kind of honestly got a concept in my head of where real estate is, but you obviously will know coming through the pandemic. What do you see in commercial real estate industry? Like, what's the good and the bad? What's some examples that you can give us?
Sure. And you know what? I see this polling question up here right now. So actually, before I go into that, John, I might just wait for the responses here because I'm actually interested to see what people say here.
No worries. Let's take a quick commercial break. Ready? Let's take a quick commercial break as Boys and Girls Club board members, right? I want everyone to think about donating to the Boys and Girls Club. And I want everyone also to know, I will take you on a tour. We can go volunteer. We can do whatever we want, but there's some wonderful things going on. And honestly, if you guys ever want an introduction to Jeff Breslin or anyone on our team, I see Jess Vest hanging out here. Anyone who ever wants to meet some people, let us know. All right, back to the show.
John, you've got a second career as a TV host or a talk show host. That was
yeah, right. Joe Wendell, come on down. Yeah, now we'll get to that maybe my next career.
Yeah,
but
so I saw the results just pop up there, the polling question, and I found it to be interesting because frankly it's what I expected, where either supply demand or comparable sales really were the key response. And what was interesting to me is that the lowest response was actually replacement cost. And I think when we think about investing in real estate, replacement cost for us is really always true north, right? Supply and demand is enormously important, and you could argue just as important. But when I think about comparable sales in real estate, it's nice to look at, but I would sort of propose this in the following way. And by the way, realtors look at comparable sales all the time when you're talking about residential real estate. It's the number one thing they use to price your home. And what I would say to that is, if you were to pay a silly price for something, and then I were to come in tomorrow and pay a slightly less silly price, it doesn't mean that I got a great deal. It simply means that I made less of a bad deal than you did. And so when you think about investing in real estate, if you can buy something at a discount to physical replacement cost, i.e., what would it cost to rebuild that asset from scratch today, and you believe that another building will ever be built in that market, then by definition, values have to revert back to physical replacement cost to ever justify new supply, right? Nobody is going to build a new building if they can buy the exact same building today for less. And so long as you are buying in a market where you are seeing above average employment growth, above average population growth, limited new supply, and you can buy at a discount to physical replacement cost, I would argue that, at least for us, that's always true north and significantly more important than comparable sales. So that's my little aside, but I'm happy, John. I think your question was around what we're seeing and what the challenges were coming out of the pandemic.
Maybe a good example, a bad example, or what's going right and wrong, whatever you deem, Mike.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about it from a sector basis. So, I think painting the real estate markets with a broad brush is sort of like saying the stock market is doing great, right? 5 names in the S&P 500 right now: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, are up something like, call it 60% on the year. And because of their size, it makes the entire S&P 500 up on the year. That story hides the fact that the other 495 stocks in the S&P 500 on average are down 4% on the year. And so it's a true tale of two cities between growth and value. And what I would say is real estate is really no different, right? Commercial real estate in the US is call it a $14 trillion market. And similar to the stock market, it cannot be painted with a broad brush. And so through the pandemic, there have been parts of the commercial real estate market that have performed phenomenally well, and others that have really struggled quite mightily. And so, maybe John will just touch on a few of those major sectors on each side of the coin. And I would classify that as sectors that are either benefiting or suffering from what I would call accelerating trends, and then those that are being affected by what I would call disrupted trends. And so let's start with maybe the areas that have struggled throughout the pandemic. And I think top of mind here in this space of really a disrupted trend would be travel and leisure and the impact that has had on the hospitality sector. And so it should really come as no surprise that hotel assets have really taken an enormous hit as a result of decreased global demand, complete shutdown of business travel. But even within hotels, there's really a bifurcation of performance. And so those that have been hurt the most have really been your full service group travel, fly to destinations, which have suffered the most, and also frankly are going to have the longest road to recovery until that world sort of turns back on. But if you look at drive to destinations, so think about things like select service hotels, they've actually held up fairly well. Many of these hotels, you would recognize the names of maybe a Hilton Garden Inn or a Courtyard Marriott or a DoubleTree, things like that, have really benefited from the drive to leisure travel, but they also have much lower break-even costs than full service hotels do. Most of them have stayed open throughout the pandemic. Their break-even occupancy is probably around 30% on average. And these hotels are also seeing the fastest recovery, given that their occupancy is ticked up into the lower mid 40s. And so I think hotels have really faced cyclical challenges as a result of coronavirus, but it is an area that we believe will recover in time. It's just going to take some time. It's a disrupted trend. On the flip side of that, I think an accelerated trend, and really the area that's been the hardest hit here has been, unsurprisingly probably to everyone on this call, retail. And right, if you think about the rise of e-commerce, it was already putting an enormous amount of strain on traditional big box shopping malls, traditional brick and mortar retail. And that trend has really only been accelerated through the pandemic. And so this is an area that I think is going to continue to struggle. It's really going through serious secular change. And I would say the only exception to that really maybe being grocery anchored retail. So, people still generally like to go to the grocery store to buy their groceries. Some of the other tenants in a strip center are, less subject to being disintermediated by the internet, right? A nail salon, a barber, a pizza place. And so I think those have struggled, but, should come back online. So I think those are the two that have really, you've seen the biggest struggle is hospitality and retail.
That's honestly, that's exactly this. It's funny that's exactly what I was thinking, but it solidified that. It's funny when I go through this, I'm going like, all right, what are the companies hiring? What are the ones going through success and non-success? McCormick Spice, they're selling a lot of spice. Marriott, not as much, so that definitely plays to that. And retail has always been on our mind, going forward.
I think it's, I think it's an area where, if you look at the other side of that, John, actually, the two areas where you're seeing perform the best through this crisis are multifamily, given just the supply-demand characteristics that you've seen in terms of just a fundamental, shortage in housing in the U.S., but also the inverse of that retail, to your point, is really the warehouse space, right? It's logistics assets, which have tremendously benefited from this rise in e-commerce. And that would really fall into a camp of what I was going to highlight as an accelerated trend, which the need for warehouse space is growing exponentially. And it's something that has performed quite well through the crisis and has been the single biggest area of focus for Blackstone over really the last 5 or 6 years, and something that I expect will continue to be the case, on a go-forward basis. And I would even go one step further to say there's a difference between last mile distribution, so warehouses that are close to major metro markets, as all of us as consumers have become more and more impatient. We want our goods tomorrow or today, or in some cities in 1 hour. And so having access to that last mile distribution is becoming more and more important for online retailers relative to, a big box center that's in the middle of the state somewhere that, Amazon would ship within a 3-hour radius 4 years ago, and we were just happy to get our goods online. So
yeah,
those are a couple of the areas.
Now, I love my next question. Okay, I thought of this one and I was like, okay, now I get asked this every day by every single candidate. What's the remote capabilities? What can I work from home? Can I work from home? I'm going to move to Alaska and I'm going to work in Baltimore. Offices have kind of been now a concept of like, do I have to go in? Do I not? As a recruiter, I'm constantly thinking about what's that situation. I wanted to get your opinion on just what's the future of working from the office versus the home, and how does that affect the real estate side of things?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I don't know. I don't know how I could leave out office. I could be a little long-winded, but I know that that's certainly on everybody's mind, and all of the talk is really about the future of the office. And so I'd say the following: that has been the most debated issue internally at Blackstone around how has the pandemic fundamentally changed the way that people are going to work on a go-forward basis. And you've really seen a couple camps here, right? You've got the one camp of experts that, are saying that, and I think this polling question is right in line here. I think you've got one camp that is really saying this is the new norm. People are going to work from home forever. We're never going to go back into an office setting. And then you've got the other camp that says, we're all going back to work 100% of the time, 5 days a week, and things are going to go back to normal, and people have a short memory. And I think the reality is, and I would agree with what everyone just said in that poll, is that the reality is it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle. I do believe that most people will go back to an office setting. Productivity levels that we have seen through this crisis are, in my opinion, likely to flatten out. And there's one major flaw that I think exists within the work from home model. And that is that for people that have been working in their careers for 10 or 15 years, they have relationships. That's great. It's easy to transition to work from home. But the problem is culture, right? It's really, really difficult for new employees who are just starting off, or even existing employees, to really build a culture and cultivate new relationships in a remote setting. And so I think what will ultimately happen is that it will be less taboo to work from home. It won't carry the same stigma that maybe it used to of just you're taking a fake sick day, and that most people will go back to the office. But what I will say there is that how office space is utilized, I think, will fundamentally change. And so if you think about over the last 15 years, the average square footage per employee in office space has fallen from roughly, call it 250 square feet per employee down to about 125 square feet, so cut in half. And so with all the social distancing and health concerns, I do think that those that remain in the office are going to require more square footage per employee. And so while on a net basis, you may have less people working from home, there's going to be a bit of an offsetting effect to that as employers, I think, take on more space for the people that are there in the office. So TBD, but I think it'll be somewhat of a wash.
That's interesting stuff. And, I didn't think about that, needing more room. I can't be sitting 6 feet from people. So, I guess I'll Zoom for now. But that's really insightful, man. I think that's an interesting, idea of where we're going within, do we work in the office or not? So we're going to do one more question. I was kind of just thinking, well, it kind of hits on what you were just saying, but where do you predict the commercial real estate, where's it going? Where are we headed as far as commercial real estate?
Yeah. So I think the areas that are the most opportunistic right now and present the greatest value are really the ones that I highlighted as having performed the best through this crisis. So multifamily and industrial, warehouses leading the way. I think if I were to ask everyone on this call, what are the two components of returns in real estate? I think most people would agree that there's really only two components, right? There's income, which has remained incredibly stable in those two asset classes through the pandemic. And I anticipate that continues to remain stable. And then there's capital appreciation. And I think the stars are really aligning right now in a meaningful way to present a meaningful move upward in terms of asset prices as it relates to multifamily and industrial from here. And I'll highlight what I would say maybe 3 reasons for that. I think the first one is pretty intuitive, right? So the first one is that in today's investing environment, investors in real estate are drawn to the asset classes that have those stable or increasing cash flows. They're drawn to asset classes that are more underwritable, more predictable, more stable, areas where you can really predict what tomorrow's cash flows are going to be. And those are primarily warehouses and multifamily. And so even through the pandemic, just anecdotally, our portfolio, which is primarily warehouses and multifamily, we've been able to collect rent at a ratio of over 98% rent collection, even through the pandemic. So it's been incredibly stable cash flow, even through the recession. And so even if you look at the global financial crisis in 2008 at its depths, even though values declined, rents only came down by about 5%. And so the areas that are not experiencing that are hotels, it's retail, it's senior living, given the COVID crisis and a supply issue. Doesn't include malls. And so I think what you're seeing here is that investor demand for those areas is really increasing. And so you're seeing this real rotation go on within the real estate markets where investors that used to invest in retail or malls or office are now shifting and seeking that more stable cash flow. And so just supply demand dynamics are suggesting that demand is going into multifamily and industrial. And so given those fundamentals, I think that that those are asset classes that'll continue to do well. And all we need is stable cash flow, right? We don't need to believe that cash flow is going to go to the moon or grow exponentially. We just need it to remain stable. And so the key here is that selection and type matters, right? As I mentioned earlier, real estate really comes down to supply demand, and the 3 most famous words in real estate are location, location, location. And it holds true here, right? Assets that are in markets that are experiencing above average population growth, above average employment growth, limited new supply are the markets where you would expect to see those favorable fundamentals. And today that tends to skew towards the Sun Belt. So markets in the Southeast and in the Southwest where continued migration is driving demand. Owning suburban apartments as opposed to owning central business district, urban, luxury, fully amenitized apartments makes a difference, versus owning garden style apartments. Owning affordable apartments makes a difference versus owning, luxury unaffordable apartments. And so we are not seeing the fundamentals the same everywhere, right? We are seeing cash flow pressure on those less desirable assets. But for the areas that we find desirable in that Sun Belt, in markets like Orlando and Phoenix and Vegas and Dallas and Atlanta, we're continuing to see those attractive opportunities. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that I think if you look at where cap rates are today, I think that's what's going to really accelerate this higher real estate valuation trend. So cap rates really is just essentially the unlevered return on the real estate or really your net operating income divided by your market price. And these are really poised to decline because they're unusually high on an absolute basis and they're unusually high on a relative basis. If you look across just the 5 major areas of institutional real estate, malls, strips, office, multifamily, industrial, cap rates today are about 5.6% on average. Over the last few years, that 5.6% has stayed relatively stable, but it is unusually high relative to the 10-year Treasury, which has declined by roughly 2% over the last couple of months, right? So 10-year Treasury yields are at 0.75%, call it, and that spread is the highest differential that you have seen since the global financial crisis, really in the last 15 years. And so that naturally begs the question of if cap rates we believe are going to come down, that means that what is going to be the catalyst, right? Why is it that cap rates can't remain at the level that they've been at for the last 2 years? There has to be a reason why we think all of a sudden now the market is ripe for that coming in and compression of cap rates. And that's really point number 3, which I think is the most important, which is the trigger of all of this. And that is the catalyst being declining real estate financing costs, right? With declining financing costs, a buyer with an average 5.6% portfolio of real estate who is paying less on their interest expense today than they were even 3 or 4 weeks ago, let alone 3 or 4 months ago, means that if cap rates stay the same and financing costs have come down, then on a levered basis, a real estate equity investor is making a higher return. And that's just simply not the way that capital markets works, right? What ends up actually happening is that equity returns stay more constant and pricing goes up and cap rates go down. So either equity investors get a windfall from these declining financing costs, which is not what happens, or more investors come into the market, they drive rates down, they drive prices up because of higher demand, which is what's happening and has happened every single time. And we're seeing this in real time in the assets that we own, where you're starting to see a pickup in cap rates actually coming down. And so we see cash flows continuing to be stable. And we saw this happen with compression earlier on in this pandemic in sort of the easy areas, right? We saw cash flows come in on treasuries. We saw earnings yields on the S&P compress. We saw bond yields compress. But we are finally now, for the first time, really seeing a meaningful change in financing costs of commercial real estate. And so to put it into perspective, and I'll just maybe end with an example here because I know we're running on time. Financing costs today are running at about 2 to 2.5% for multifamily and industrial assets on a long-term fixed rate basis. And so that pressure is really the appreciation story. So to frame what that means, I'd say the following. If you get even a small reduction in cap rates, so I'm talking, 0.1, 0.2%, right? What does that do for values? By way of example, if you were to go from a 4.5% cap rate to a 4.3% cap rate, that is roughly a 4% asset value adjustment. If you were using leverage, right? Think about this as if you buy your own home. You put 20% down payment, you borrow 80. Let's say in this argument, you put 50% down and you only borrow 50. In that environment, suddenly a 0.2% change in cap rates results in an 8% increase in the underlying value of the assets. And in today's world, we are not seeing financing costs and cap rates coming down by 0.2% or 0.3% or 0.5%, but by over 1%. And so I think in summary, when you combine those 3 things, right, re-rating of cap rates, declining financing costs, and investor rotation moving into assets that have more stable cash flow, I think it's a dynamic that sets up really well for those more stable areas like multifamily and industrial. And so it's no different than what we're all experiencing in the single family home market, which is prices have been going up because mortgage rates are at a 50-year low.
All right, Mike. I'll tell you, that was wow. Thank you, honestly, for doing this. Putting yourself out there to have this conversation with FEI and for the Boys and Girls Club of Metropolitan Baltimore. Thank you to you and Leah. I really appreciate it. The last polling question has just popped up. It's very important to FEI as well as the Boys and Girls Club, as we want to kind of gather what's on people's minds and where they want things to go. The next 2 events I'm actually exceptionally excited about because it kind of continues on where's the economy. The Federal Reserve is going to be hosting an FEI event. It'll be on October 21st at noon. It'll be a nice lunch, Zoom. We will send out all the information to that. I'd say this has been a great participation of 30 plus people on a Thursday night. Really appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to have a quick Q&A. I wanted to start off, I'll just get Leah going real quick if she's ready. I always like to know how we can help your business and also how to utilize and use Trustate as a business. So what would you say, Leah, what would you highlight about your services, and or is there someone that you love to meet or network with?
Sure. So Trustate, our distribution model is actually, we help individual executors, so people who just happen to be going through the process of settling a loved one's estate. But we also work with businesses, so wealth management firms and financial advisors and bankers. All of those individuals are oftentimes tasked with guiding clients through the process with little to no benefit to them. So we are actually able to provide a strategic advantage to them in helping them to essentially bring our service to their clients in a way that works well with their actual business model. We can integrate, pretty stealthily. And also with all types of lawyers. So, from estate lawyers to general practitioners to larger firms. So, any connections that anyone has to anyone within the wealth management and banking world, as well as, law firms. And then just if they know anyone, who's going through a difficult time and, maybe needs a helping hand, we're here to help. So.
Thank you. Real quick, I wanted to point Mike Mendelsohn. There was 2 questions directed to you during your time. I want you to look over those just for a quick second. And the other one, I just wanted to highlight. We have October 21st at noon with the Federal Reserve Monetary Policy Overview of the Economy. The event after that is with Under Armour, discussing culture, hosted by the finance and accounting operations of Under Armour. I think that's going to be an amazing opportunity to get an understanding of how Under Armour sets the tone for culture. That is on November 12th in the morning. It'll be a breakfast at, I believe, 8:30. I'll be sending out information on that as soon as we get things tied down. Kevin Ridgely or anyone from FEI, anyone want to just talk about FEI before we get to the Q&A?
Sorry, I was looking up something, John. We have another meeting also, the one we're doing with John Dingle. I forgot the date. Does anybody on the call have that right in front of them?
I can send that out as well. That's going to be another very interesting topic too that they're hosting. So I can get that.
Okay.
13th of October, I think.
Yeah, the 13th of October at, let me just get the time real quick. I think that's a very interesting one.
2 o'clock.
What time?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, okay. Yeah, we're sending out a blast to all of our members, so
Awesome.
Keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I can give you an update on FEI. We're the Baltimore chapter of FEI, a group of CFOs that get together to try to network and expand our knowledge and contacts around the region. It's been a little trying for us in one respect where we can't get together in person the last 6 months, but amazingly, we've probably had more actual events than we usually do just because they're virtual and they're a little easier to orchestrate because you don't have to set up a location. But there's a good group of people, so anybody on the call that's not a member of ours, clearly should reach out to us, anybody here, and we can give you more. It's I find it very worthwhile. It's been great finding out about companies in our typical format. We have a meeting each month, either for profit, not for profit businesses will go either in the morning or in the evening. The evening we have adult beverages, so we get a little better attendance. but it's amazing the companies. I've lived in Baltimore all my life, went to Baltimore City Public Schools, and it's amazing the business has been here for a long time that I just didn't know existed. And it's been really worthwhile. And plus besides just the membership we have in general, it's a good bunch of people and a great way to network. And hopefully we'll be doing that in person real soon.
Real quick, I actually really like the polling questions we had tonight just because I think there's a lot of different things going on. I honestly would love to talk to someone who could understand the strategic direction that Baltimore City is taking. I have been, all my mind has been, where is Baltimore going to become stronger? How are we going to attract corporations? How are we going to fill the vacancies of Inner Harbor? The idea of talking about homeschooling, I'm sure there's a lot of people want to air out what they think of that. So that'll also be one that maybe we can make happen. Does anyone have a question for Leah? If not, I do.
Go for it.
So I'm a basic person, a simple person. So what's the first thing I'm doing if I'm setting up the right way? I'm 38 years old. What do I do to set up my estate the correct way? Or what's the first thing you think is like the basics?
we can always talk about this offline, but
Yeah.
you know, if you have like no estate planning documents, the first thing I would do is really like sit down and think through your head on every account, asset that you own. Really sit there and just write a list out. You don't have to write the values of everything or be exact, but just ballpark figures. And I mean, get granular. Think about, you know, what I see clients often miss is they have this great estate plan, but they had a retirement account when they were 21 at their first job that never had a named beneficiary on it. And then when they pass away, you have to go and, you know, find that retirement account first, and then ultimately distribute it out through a probate estate, which is annoying. So first step I would say is just write down all your assets, and really think about it. Second thing I would do is living will, power of attorney. Get those, you know, immediately. Get them yesterday if you didn't have them, just because you want to make sure that someone has the legal authority to act on your behalf if you're not able to act for yourself. And then obviously, you know, figuring out who the named beneficiaries are on each of those accounts, if so. And then for the assets without named beneficiaries, like if you own your home in just your name, or, you know, you and your spouse own your home together, or whatever the case is, getting a will that makes sense for those assets that don't have a named beneficiary. And then obviously looking at your whole financial picture, seeing what makes sense to travel through a will and or revocable living trust and what doesn't. Also life insurance. Look at how much, often people think, oh, I don't have an estate. I, you know, don't have much money to my name. I don't have that much in my bank account. But when push comes to shove, they have a $3 million term life policy. So now they're a millionaire. So, you know, when you pass away, often your asset picture looks very different than it did when you were alive. So it's thinking that through and making sure that your plan makes sense from a tax perspective, an asset protection perspective, as well as just a general perspective. If you have young children, you know, that involves, if you have a term life insurance policy, making sure it passes to those children in trust, because do you really want them to get it outright at 18 if you were going to pass away tomorrow, God forbid? So, you know, it's just thinking through that stuff, and, you know, meeting with the right people. And, you know, I recommend always speaking with an estate lawyer to do your estate planning and not using, you know, a do-it-yourself type estate planning from a will drafting and trust drafting program.
Awesome. Before we open up the networking, any other questions or any other thoughts? Going once, going twice. All right, time to talk. Kevin, what's the next concert you're going to? Are you actually going to any concerts? Unmute, Kevin.
It's been hard. There aren't many. You can only find outdoor. I'm toying with seeing Sweet Lita's having a concert at Harper's Ferry Brewery on Saturday afternoon. And,
so you got to go all the way to West Virginia to see a concert now, right?
Well, I kind of like Sweet Lita. It's the last time the drummer's going to play with them, so it's a thought. But I'm looking for the Ram's Head, I believe, is opening again at limited capacity.
I'll tell you, I would love to get them to do an FEI event, because I know the controller over there and she's been running the whole operation, and I think that'd just be cool to kind of see how that plays in as a leader of their accounting finance. But we can make that happen.
Yeah, we could get a show somehow in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I would love to go see a show and get an FEI concert, or figure something out like that.
Carbon Leaf's having one down in a winery in Northern Virginia soon, if you're a fan of Carbon Leaf. But,
oh, yeah. That's always, man, Mitch used to see Carbon Leaf, I think, every 5 seconds. I mean, they're a good show.
They are. I don't know why they're not more popular.
Yeah, they're a great live band. But Jeff Breslin, you still there? You might be on mute.
I'm here.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask, is there any other good words? I mean, we just opened up a renovated club in Westport, which I don't know if everyone knows where Westport is, West Baltimore. Tell us some good news. Give us something good.
Oh gosh, John, that is the good news for the past 2 weeks. Renovated Westport. I talked about the grant, and I mean the bad news is I've always known that Mike and Leah were incredibly intelligent. I am feeling wildly underqualified listening to Mike's explanation of the market. I know what stocks are, but that's about my level of understanding. So that is That is the bad news, I guess, for me, but the good news for all of us, because that was pretty awesome.
I can add in, I know, Jeff, you've hooked up our admissions. My daytime job's the Seed School of Maryland in a giving back sort of capacity, but you've hooked us up with your directors of the various locations you have, and it's working out well. Your kids are our kids. The kids that do Boys and Girls Club are the students that we look for. So I think that was a great relationship that's developing.
Yeah, we're excited about it, and collaboration is a huge part of what we do. There's certainly plenty of opportunity and need across the Baltimore area. So I'm happy that it worked out.
Moved outside. It's too nice out. Chris, you're still hanging out with us. What's going on in your world? How are you doing?
I am friends and colleagues of Leah and Mike, and your state. So I obviously here to support them and learn about FBI and Boys and Girls Club as well. So
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Job. Yeah, great job, both of you. Really helpful. Make me think I need to do more things like this, just to kind of keep on tap with information. I'm a sales and marketing growth consultant for startups. So.
I heard some of it. It got muffled a little bit, but no, thanks for attending, man. And this was I think a very good Thursday night spent. I know, Leah, you got me thinking now, like what do I have, But well,
Probably a lot more than you think that you don't even realize. So it's
the piggy bank from elementary school is still hanging out somewhere,
Yeah.
But
my father was looking at his planning, and one day he gets this letter, and it turns out he had a retirement account that he forgot about from when his early 20s that had grown and was worth like $50,000 by the time, and he had no idea it even existed. So it was nice found money to him, but I think it happens more often than we think, and often it actually SGs back to the state that you were in, or if you have a paycheck that you never cashed, and you can actually check the little lost and found and in each state and see it. So.
we did this Zoom. We've been doing it for a couple months now, but and Kevin, or I don't know if you guys would be interested, but we go to Pure Wine Cafe in Ellicott City and pick up like 6 bottles of wine and do at-home wine tastings with the vineyards, and it's actually really cool. They've been lining up, like they did Australia, right? And the guy was literally like giving us a tour of the Australian vineyard and showing us the kangaroos in his field and talking about the concert he threw. His last concert he had Elton John there, and he basically just like sipped the wine. And the guy who either created it or the promoters, they tell you about the different wines. It's been phenomenal, honestly. But that's a cool Zoom that's been going on.
Send me an email. I've never heard of that. That would be interesting.
It's right on Main Street in Ellicott City. It's called Pure Wine Cafe. I'll email you, Kevin.
I know that Main Street. I can't think. Oh, I'm thinking of Catonsville. It's Ellicott City. Okay. I never go past Catonsville. I find too many places there.
Okay, it's nothing wrong with Catonsville either. Yeah.
John, Trebek Evans, I'm going to run, but thank you. You were awesome. Mike, Leah, thank you. We'll talk very soon. Thanks everybody for joining.
Jeff, this is good.
You look like you should have a beer out there.
I'm gonna hop as well.
Yeah.
It was so nice to meet everyone and to have the opportunity to speak today. And anyone who has questions, just feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. That was very informative. I'm at the age I got to start thinking about this stuff.
Oh. All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you both. Let's head it out.
Okay.
Mike, I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.